My sister fired me the very week she became president of our family's hotel chain. And she did it with a smile that made it feel less like business and more like payback she'd been saving for years. Her name is Verity Ashford, and I'm Stellan Ashford. And for most of my life, I was the one who kept things running quietly while she collected attention like it was part of her salary. Our company, Ashford Haven Hospitality, wasn't just a business, it was the family identity, the thing everyone talked about at holidays and fought over in private. I worked my way up from operations, learning every detail the hard way. Staffing crises at midnight, angry guests during power outages, vendor fraud, and the 1,000 invisible problems that can sink a hotel without warning. Verity, on the other hand, was always the vision person, the one who attended galas and shook hands, the one our board liked because she sounded confident. When our father stepped down for health reasons, the board made her president, and she wasted no time proving that her first priority wasn't leadership, it was control. She called me into a meeting that felt like a performance, with HR present and legal on standby, and she told me my role was being eliminated for restructuring. I didn't even get to speak before she slid a termination packet across the table like she was handing me a menu. Then she leaned back and said, "Nothing personal, Stellan. I just need people I can trust." That line landed like a slap, because if trust was the metric, she wouldn't even qualify to run a lemonade stand. I kept my face calm, but inside I felt something snap into place. She didn't fire me because I was useless. She fired me because she was afraid of what I knew, and she wanted the company to look like her victory, not our family's reality. As I stood to leave, she added one more sentence, almost sweetly. "Don't make this messy." She thought I'd disappear quietly. She thought blood ties made me powerless. She had no idea the company's stability was tied to systems only one person truly understood. And it wasn't her. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. That night, I drove to our smallest property on the edge of town, not because I needed to work there, but because I needed to think somewhere quiet, somewhere the walls didn't feel like they belonged to Verity's ego. I sat in the empty lobby and replayed every warning sign from the past year. Verity had been pushing for rapid expansion, chasing glossy headlines instead of stable margins. She wanted to buy 2 struggling boutique hotels at inflated prices because she liked how they would look in a press release. She ignored the risk reports I prepared. She dismissed the maintenance backlog we already had. She treated operations like something you can fix later, as if hotels don't run on plumbing, staffing, vendor reliability, and guest trust. And the closer she got to the presidency, the more she treated me like a threat, not a brother. She started requesting access to systems she never cared about before: vendor contracts, payroll controls, audit logs, property-level metrics. She asked for copies of my playbooks and crisis protocols. At first I thought she was finally taking the business seriously. Now I understood. She wasn't learning. She was trying to take the keys before locking me out. Verity didn't just want power. She wanted to erase the person who could prove she didn't earn it. Because as long as I was there, the company's quiet wins had a name attached to them, and it wasn't hers. 2 days after my termination, my phone rang at 6:17 a.m., and the name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Leora Penn, our top general manager, the one who could fix chaos with a calm voice and a clipboard. Leora didn't call early unless something was burning. She told me Verity had arrived at headquarters with a new executive consultant, Benton Crow, and they were demanding immediate changes. New vendors, new staffing structure, new reporting lines, without understanding the property-level consequences. Leora said Verity had also ordered the removal of a fraud prevention checkpoint I personally built into our vendor payments because it was slowing approvals. That sentence hit me like ice. The checkpoint wasn't optional. It prevented duplicate billing and kickbacks, things that happen constantly in hospitality when leadership stops paying attention. Leora sounded worried, but also angry. "She fired you, and now she's dismantling the safeguards you created," she said. I don't think she understands what she's touching. I told Leora the truth. I no longer had authority, but I could still advise her as a friend if she needed clarity. Leora paused and then said something that made my jaw tighten. "She's also telling people you were terminated for poor performance." Poor performance. That was Verity's strategy. Remove me, then rewrite me. She wasn't satisfied with firing me. She wanted to destroy my credibility, so no one would question her decisions. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was an attempt to rewrite history. I didn't storm into headquarters. I didn't call Verity and argue. I did something far more effective. I prepared. I gathered documentation of every system I built, every policy I introduced, every incident I resolved, and every board report that had my name on it. I collected emails from executives thanking me for saving major accounts, stabilizing properties, and preventing losses. I also pulled my personal records of Verity's ignored risk assessments. Files I had kept because in our business, forgetting the past is how you repeat expensive mistakes. I booked a meeting with a corporate attorney named Gideon Sayer, someone outside our company who didn't care about family dynamics, only facts. Gideon listened quietly, then asked a question that made everything feel sharper. Do you have proof she's defaming your performance to employees and managers? I didn't have a recording, but I had written messages from 2 managers repeating Verity's claim, and I had performance evaluations that contradicted it completely. Gideon nodded and told me not to confront her yet. Let her move, he said. People who rush into power leave fingerprints everywhere. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt since she fired me, control. Verity believed she had removed the only obstacle. But I wasn't an obstacle. I was a foundation. And foundations don't disappear when you insult them. They reveal how unstable everything is when you try to build on ego alone. Verity's first major decision as president came faster than anyone expected. And it was exactly the kind of move that looks bold on paper and disastrous in practice. She approved the acquisition of one of the boutique hotels she'd been obsessed with, pushing it through without a full operational audit, bypassing the maintenance review I had warned her about months earlier. On the surface, the deal looked glamorous. Historic building, prime location, lots of brand story. But underneath, the property was a minefield of outdated wiring, staffing instability, and vendor contracts written to benefit everyone except the owner. Within days of the takeover, problems started surfacing. Guest complaints increased. Maintenance tickets stacked up. Payroll discrepancies appeared. And the worst part was that Verity had dismantled the internal escalation system I built, replacing it with a generic reporting dashboard that looked impressive, but told her nothing useful in real time. General managers like Leora Penn tried to raise concerns, but Verity dismissed them as resistance to change. That's what insecure leaders call experience when it contradicts their vision. From the outside, everything still looked fine, press releases, internal emails full of optimism. But inside the company, people were starting to feel the ground shift. The systems that quietly kept chaos in check were gone, and no one was prepared to replace them. 2 weeks later, the finance team flagged something unusual. Operating costs were rising sharply while projected revenue stayed flat. Verity demanded explanations, but the answers required operational knowledge she didn't have and had never bothered to learn. Vendor invoices were slipping through without verification. Emergency maintenance was being approved at premium rates because preventive work had been ignored. Staff turnover spiked at 3 properties after her streamlining changes removed experienced supervisors. When she asked Benton Crow, her consultant, to explain the discrepancies, he gave her polished excuses instead of solutions. The board began asking questions, not publicly but privately, where pressure is real. They wanted to know why metrics that had been stable for years were suddenly unpredictable. Verity blamed legacy inefficiencies and indirectly pointed the finger at my tenure, claiming she was still cleaning up old problems. That strategy backfired, because several board members remembered exactly who had presented the clean audits and stable reports for years. And it wasn't Verity. The more she tried to explain the numbers away, the more obvious it became that she didn't understand them. Confidence without comprehension doesn't survive scrutiny. I wasn't in the room, but I knew the moment my name resurfaced. Leora called me late one evening, her voice low and careful. She told me a board member had directly asked, "What changed operationally after Stellan left?" That question cut through weeks of narrative building in one sentence. Suddenly, my removal wasn't framed as restructuring. It was framed as a variable, a risk factor. Verity tried to redirect the conversation, insisting the transition period was temporary and that her new leadership model would stabilize things soon. But when pressed for specifics, she couldn't provide them. The board requested documentation of the systems that had been replaced and the rationale behind removing them. Those documents didn't exist. Because Verity hadn't replaced systems, she'd removed them. In corporate governance, absence of documentation is louder than criticism. It signals impulsiveness. It signals ego. It signals exposure. That night, I realized I didn't need to reinsert myself into the company to affect outcomes. My absence was already doing the work for me. The moment Verity truly panicked wasn't when costs rose or complaints increased. It was when she received a formal request from the board's audit committee asking for a detailed breakdown of operational controls that had been altered or eliminated since her appointment. That request wasn't routine. It meant oversight had escalated. It meant trust was thinning. Within hours, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in weeks. Verity. I didn't answer immediately. I let it ring until it stopped, then waited. 10 minutes later, she texted me something she never would have sent before. We need to talk. Urgently. There was no command in her words. No authority. Just anxiety. She had fired me to remove a threat, but now the absence of my systems had exposed her leadership. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted cover. She wanted me to quietly explain what she didn't understand, without anyone knowing she needed help. That's when I understood what power actually looks like. It isn't shouting orders. It's being the person someone tries to call when everything starts falling apart. When I finally agreed to meet Verity, it wasn't at headquarters or any family home. It was in a neutral conference room at a downtown hotel, the kind of place where nothing feels personal and everything feels recorded even when it isn't. She arrived early, pacing, phone in hand, confidence replaced by urgency. The moment I walked in, she started talking before I even sat down, explaining how the board was overreacting, how the audit committee didn't understand her long-term vision, and how the company just needed time to adjust. I listened without interrupting, because people reveal the most when they think they're still convincing you. Eventually she stopped and looked at me, finally asking for what she really wanted. Help. She wanted me to explain the systems she had removed, justify decisions she had already made, and quietly reassure the board that everything was under control. I told her calmly that I no longer worked for the company and that any advice I gave would need to be formal, documented, and approved by the board, not filtered through her. Her face tightened. She wasn't used to being told no by me. She reminded me we were family. I reminded her that she hadn't acted like it when she fired me and tried to erase my record. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. She didn't have leverage anymore. Verity wasn't removed immediately. Instead, she was stripped of key decision-making authority and placed under direct oversight, a move that looks mild on paper but is devastating in practice. Executives stopped deferring to her. Consultants stopped taking her calls without approvals. Managers began reporting directly to interim leadership. The same people who once applauded her vision now avoided being associated with it. She tried to regain control by blaming advisors, by reframing decisions as misunderstood, by insisting she was being sabotaged, but none of it landed. Because sabotage requires intent. What happened was consequence. Her decision to fire me hadn't removed a rival. It had removed the foundation that made her role possible. And once the board saw that clearly, her presidency became temporary in everything but name. Months later, I stood in the lobby of one of our hotels. Not as an employee, not as a rival, but as someone who finally understood his own worth independent of a title. The company stabilized under new operational leadership. Many of the systems I built reinstated because they worked, not because my name was attached to them. Verity eventually resigned for personal reasons, a phrase that hides accountability behind politeness. I didn't celebrate her fall. I didn't need to. I walked away with something far more valuable than revenge, clarity. She tried to erase me to make herself look powerful, but power doesn't come from removing people. It comes from building something that can stand without lies. In the end, I didn't lose my place in the company. I lost the illusion that family loyalty and corporate ambition could coexist without integrity. And once that illusion was gone, everything else became lighter.